Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. The case that I'm going to be looking into today is definitely, well, I found it absolutely amazing, to be honest. It's horror turned into, well, I'm not going to let you know actually, because you'll find out at the end of the video. It's the story of Barbara Mackle and how she was kidnapped whilst with her mother and just taken away into the night. So yeah, let's jump in. Barbara was born in 1948 to her father Robert and mother Jane. And they were a wealthy family. He was a land developer and was a really good businessman, and they had a lot of money. Barbara was actually attending Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia at the time, and of this case occurring, she was just a lovely girl. And they adored her. Now, she was actually feeling really unwell and had been for a little while. Something was going around and she had caught it. So her mother actually heard this and decided to drive to campus to bring her home for Christmas herself. And that is what she did. On the way back, they decided that they wasn't going to drive the entire way, and so they would take a break and stay in a hotel. And they stayed at the Roadway Inn. This was, I haven't actually mentioned the date yet, 17th of December in 1968. And Barbara was 20 years old at this point in her life. They were in this inn, mother and daughter just chatting away to each other, just like normal family stuff. And then they get a knock at the door. Now they weren't, well, definitely weren't expecting anybody. They were in the middle of a place where they wouldn't normally be, in a hotel or whatever. And so they were really curious as to who it was. They shouted through the door, and a man replied. And they basically got the impression, from what I can understand, that maybe this was a police officer. He told them that there had been a car accident. It was a white Ford, and it matched the description of the car that Barbara's boyfriend drove. And so they were worried, because they said that a young man was involved in it. Oh, hello, Tigger. That a young man was involved in this car accident. So they began to panic, thinking that it was Barbara's boyfriend. And therefore this was definitely the police knocking at the door late at night. So what they did is Jane actually went ahead and opened it because she was worried. As soon as she opened that door, she let the horror in, and it all went downhill from there, basically. They entered. They were two people. They were both wearing masks. One of them, the first one, who was bigger, had a shotgun. The second one had a weapon that I can't actually remember and was a bit smaller. Now, when Jane actually came around, she just, well, obviously noticed that her daughter was missing. What she didn't know at the time was that she had actually been driven 52 kilometers away to a pine forest. She had been buried alive. Yes. The kidnappers had pre-dug a hole. They had put in this fiberglass box reinforced with some wood. Put all different supplies in there, put an air system in there, put a filtration thing. If water came out, if it rained, there was a pump to pump out the water to the surface or whatever. There was also pipes leading up to the surface so that she could breathe. There was food, water, jumper, a light, just all these things. Basically, they had intentions of putting her up for ransom, but they didn't actually want to kill Barbara. So they put all of this in play, this elaborate plan in play, and they told Barbara to get in, which she did. She got in there. They then told her to hold this sign which said kidnapped, and they snapped a photo of her, and on it she was actually smiling. At the time, it was a thought that she didn't want her father to think that they had hurt her, basically, because like she was really close with her parents. Barbara's mother, Jane, obviously rang the police straight away. The FBI did get involved, and the search for Barbara was on. The next day, the family got a phone call from the kidnappers giving this elaborate instruction of what you needed to do. They wanted $500,000. They wanted them to put an ad in the paper specifying this information, like, I don't know, something along the lines of, we've got the money here so that our family member can come on down and they can take the money and we will receive them. It's I'm paraphrasing and totally changing the words, but it's something along those lines. They gave strict instructions on the money as well. They wanted no more than a certain amount of notes. They wanted it in small bills, yada yada yada. When they saw this ad, that would let them know that the family had the money together and that they wanted to meet up. They then said that they would call back and arrange a meet. They told them that Barbara had about 7 days worth of food, air, water, whatever, in that coffin that she was buried alive in. It wasn't long after as well that because originally they didn't actually provide proof that Barbara was still alive, and then not long after they got the picture and some of her jewelry as well to prove that it was definitely Barbara that they had. And well, they still didn't really have too much proof that she was alive, I guess, apart from the photo, but they could have easily took that photo and then killed her, but they didn't, obviously, thank goodness. Now, on the side of obviously Barbara, when they put that lid on that coffin and started hammering it in, she screamed, obviously. Can you imagine being buried alive? Can you imagine hearing the mud topple on top of your coffin that you're in, and the more mud that they put in, the less you hear of it, because it's slowly getting further and further away, and then just hearing silence, them walking away, and then just nothing, and you being in there in a grave, buried alive. I just can't even imagine the terror of what she must have gone through dealing with it. Robert was determined to get his daughter back, and so he got together all the money very quickly. He put the advert out to say that he had the money, and they did call back. And by the 18th of December, everything was done. They'd set up a meeting area as to where to drop off the money, etc. They told them that they didn't want any police involved, like, you know, just typical standard kidnapping stuff here. The drop didn't exactly go as planned, though, because there had been a string of robberies around this. They wanted it dropped off by the sea, so the suitcase was dropped off, and the kidnappers went to go and get it. But there had been a string of robberies in this area, and somebody local noticed this out of place sort of vehicle. They figured that because of the robberies and stuff, that they should report it to the police. They did just that. And bearing in mind, there was a ransom drop there. Hi, Bear. So yeah, it really didn't go to plan, because the police arrived, obviously. They dropped everything. They dropped the money, and apparently shots were fired. Hang on. Get a bit of distance here. Let me resort myself out. There we go. Yeah, like, shots were exchanged, but the kidnappers did escape. The police picked up this bag and they found that it was full of money. The other bag that was there was full of scuba gear. I don't even know what that was for. I'm not sure, to be quite honest. When Robert was informed that it had all gone tits up, he was devastated. He was terrified that they would now kill Barbara, and it was literally nothing to do with him. The police, he had involved the police, obviously, but they were backing off. They were not marking the money. They made him write down all the serial numbers of the money so that they could at least have something to be able to find where it had gone, but they were really cautious and they didn't want to do anything to risk Barbara's life. So it wasn't Robert's fault at all. It was just this crazy mad fluke that happened. And so he wanted to inform the kidnappers that it wasn't his fault. He convinced the FBI to allow him to do so, so he put another advert out in the paper and basically outlining that, you know, it wasn't him. He really wanted to still pay the money. He still had the money. They could do another drop, and just so long as he could get his daughter back. Now, incredibly, the kidnappers actually responded, and they set up another drop. Now, it's thought that they really, really needed this money or something. Like, they wasn't... Again, I don't think they really wanted to harm Barbara because of everything they did for her, like, to keep her alive. So they were just really concentrating on the money, so they trusted him. And this time, the drop went off without a hitch. They got the money and off they went. And this was the 20th of December. Then the kidnappers actually rang the FBI and they give them the information as to where Barbara was. She was buried near the intersection in the city of Norcross in Georgia. The police found out. They started looking through all these woods, and on the other side, buried under the ground, Barbara actually heard footsteps. She didn't know whether these were her kidnappers, because they had said that they were going to come back and check on her and had not done so yet. It had been 3 days at this point. She had been in the ground for 3 days, which is just beyond awful. But she was still alive down there, and so she starts tapping away, regardless as to whether it's them or not. I mean, if it was them, they knew exactly where they buried her anyway, so tapping wouldn't have made a difference. But if it was somebody else, then it would have done. Maybe she would have been heard. So she's tapping away, and the police are up there looking for her. They don't hear her at first, but eventually a police officer does locate a patch of clay that looked like it had been recently disturbed. Raina, what are you doing? And so around about that same time, one of the officers nearby also heard the tapping, so they figured they're in the right area. They all get down on their hands and knees and they start digging with their hands. They are just unearthing it, and they find the coffin, essentially, and they find Barbara inside. She is dehydrated, very dehydrated. She's cold. She's lost quite a lot of weight. She's malnourished, but she was alive, and that was the best news ever. Now, they finally got Barbara back, and she was alive and well, and it was a miracle, and everyone was so ecstatic, but now they needed to find who did this. Now, remember the drop that went terribly wrong in the first place, and everyone was so terrified that it would cause a lot of problems, obviously, and that they may take Barbara's life as a result of it. Luckily, they didn't. But that did actually provide them a lead. They found an abandoned blue Volvo, and when they looked into who owned it, they managed to trace it back to a guy. This guy was called George Beacon, and he was a lab assistant at this Miami University. They found fingerprints and photos of George with an unidentified woman. They also found other pictures of Barbara lying in that fiberglass box with the kidnap sign and stuff, so they took quite a few of those photos, and then they kept them. Didn't keep them, put them in a car, I guess? I don't know. They then found that a boat had been stolen from the university, and they located that. They continued to look into George and this mysterious woman. They actually found out that it was a student called Ruth Ellisman Shear. She was 26 years old, and she also went to that university. These people had started having an affair, and they concocted this crazy plan together. They found out that this identity of George was a fake identity, and the real identity was a man called Gary Stephen Quist, who was actually an escapee prisoner. Now, of course, they put out all of this information to the public, and they were really trying to find him. A lot of tips came in, and they were very helpful too. And 2 days later, they did actually find him. They found him on Hog Island, hiding away in these murky waters, surrounded by all these different dangerous animals. And they also found the money still in the suitcase, $480,000. He'd spent a little bit of it, but most of it was still there. Now, it would actually take a bit longer to find Ruth, because she went on the run, and she was on the run for a little bit. Gary was sentenced to life in prison, but then he ended up only serving 10. And whilst he was in prison, he did some medical things, and he ended up actually getting a medical license. He got all these different jobs in these different places, being a doctor and things, and when they found out about his criminal history and the details, they then fired him, and then he moved on. He got a job somewhere else, and they carried on. Now, one place did have him for a bit longer because they literally didn't have a doctor. They knew about his past and his criminal history, but they didn't have a doctor. And so they did hire him for a long time, but when the actual details of Barbara's kidnapping fully came out, they then fired him too. Oh no, he lost his medical license after that. It's just a bit crazy. In 2006, he was then arrested again. He was actually arrested on a boat. He was carrying all of this cocaine, which he had... I'm sorry, but it's kind of funny because this guy is just nuts. He had put it to a concrete block outside of the boat, and he was towing it along, and what he was going to do was just going to chop the rope if he got caught. So then the cocaine, like $2 million worth of cocaine, would just sit at the bottom of the ocean and he wouldn't get caught for it, and then he could just get it back up, I guess. But they caught him before he could snip it, and so they caught him. He was also importing illegal immigrants, I think. And I'm sure they paid him like $6,000 each. I think there were 4 of them, and they paid him like $6,000 each to take them over. Now, Ruth was finally found in 1969. She was apprehended as well. The reason she was caught is that she actually applied for a nurse's job at a psychiatric institute, and they took her fingerprints, and when they put them in the database, ding dong, it came up that she was a wanted criminal. So that's how she was caught. She got 7 years and she only served 3. But going back to Barbara, she moved on with her life. She is an absolute amazing survivor. She kept so calm in that box. It's insane. She just needed to survive, and that was it. She then got married, she's had kids, and she's gone on to just have a wonderful life. So yeah. This story was crazy, and I'm so thankful that Barbara was found alive and well in the end of it, because it could have ended so differently. And she managed to survive. She managed to live the life that she should have done. And it's just amazing. But yeah, that's the end of this case. If you guys enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you want to. And that's all I have today on this case. Thank you very much. Bye.